The death and deification of Augustus, both of which were predicted by evident signs. While he was closing a census period with a purifactory ceremony in the crowded Campus Martius, an eagle circled around him several times, then flew to the nearby temple and perched above the first A of Agrippa's name. As soon as Augustus noticed this, he ordered Tiberius, who was acting as his colleague, to read out the usual vows for the next census period, because, though having composed and recorded them on a tablet, he would not make himself responsible for vows payable after his death. At about the same time, lightning melted the initial letter of his name on the inscription below one of his statues. This was interpreted to mean that he would live only another 100 days, which the letter C signifies, and that he would be enrolled among the gods, since the remainder of the word, namely Aesar, is the Etruscan word for God. Again, when sending Tiberius off to Illyricum and planning to accompany him as far as Beneventum, Augustus got held up by a long list of court cases and cried, "I will not stay here any longer, whoever tries to detain me." These words were subsequently recalled as prophetic. He started off for Beneventum, but on reaching Astura, he met with a favorable breeze and decided to take a ship that evening, although night voyages were against his usual habits, and so contracted an illness, the first symptom of which was diarrhea. After coasting past Campania, with its islands, he spent the next 4 days in his villa on Capri, where he rested and amused himself. As he had sailed through the bay of Puteoli, the passengers and crew of a recently arrived Alexandrian ship had put on white robes and garlands, burned incense, and wished him the greatest of good fortune. It was to him, they said, that they owed their lives and their liberty to sail the seas. To him they owed their entire freedom and prosperity. This incident gratified Augustus so deeply that he gave each member of his staff 40 aurae, making them promise under oath to spend them only on Alexandrian trade goods. What was more, he made the last 2 or 3 days of his stay on Capri the occasion for distributing among other presents Roman togas and Greek mantles, insisting that the Romans should speak and dress like Greeks, and that the Greeks should do the opposite. He sat for a long time watching the athletic training of the many local ephebes, Capri being a very conservative settlement. Afterwards, he invited these young men to a banquet at which he presided, and not merely allowed but expected them to play jokes and freely scramble for the tokens which he threw, entitling the holders to fruit, sweetmeats, and the like. In short, he indulged in every form of fun. Augustus called Capri Lubberland, because some of his staff, now settled on the island, were growing so lazy. One of his friends, Mazgaba by name, he always used to call by the Greek word for founder, as though he were the founder of the settlement. This fellow had died the year before, and when Augustus noticed from his dining room window that a crowd of torchbearers were attending his tomb, he improvised this Greek line, "I see the founder's tomb ablaze with fire," then asked Tiberius's friend Thrasyllus, who was reclining opposite him and did not understand the reference, "What poet wrote that?" Thrasyllus hesitated, and Augustus capped his own line, reciting, "With torches, look, they honor Mazgaba," and again asked, "Who wrote that line?" Thrasyllus, unable to divine the authorship, mumbled, "Both lines are very good, whoever the poet was." Augustus burst out laughing and made great fun of Thrasyllus. He next crossed over to Neapolis, although his stomach was weak from an intermittent recurrence of the same trouble, and watched an athletic competition which was held in his honor every 5 years. Finally, he started off with Tiberius and said goodbye to him at Beneventum. Feeling worse on the homeward journey, he took to his bed at Nola, and sent messengers to recall Tiberius from his journey. At his arrival, Augustus had a long talk with him in private, after which he attended to no further important business. On the day that he died, Augustus frequently inquired whether rumors of his illness were causing any popular disturbance. He called for a mirror, and had his hair combed and his lower jaw, which had fallen from weakness, propped up. Presently he summoned a group of friends and asked, "Have I played my part in the farce of life credibly enough?" adding the theatrical tag, "If I have pleased you, kindly signify. Appreciation with a warm goodbye." Then he dismissed them, but when fresh visitors arrived from Rome, he wanted to hear the latest news of Drusus's daughter, who was ill. Finally, he kissed his wife with "Goodbye, Livia. Remember our marriage," and died almost at once. He must have longed for such an easy exit, for whenever he had heard of anyone having passed away quickly and painlessly, he used to pray, "May heaven grant the same euthanasia to me and mine." The only sign that his wits were wandering just before he died was a sudden cry of terror. 40 young men are carrying me off." But even this may be read as a prophecy rather than a delusion, because 40 praetorians were to form the guard of honor that conveyed him to his lying in state. Augustus died in the same room as his father Octavius. That was the 19th of August, at about the 9th hour. The consuls of the year being Sextus Pompeius and Sextus Apuleius, when he was just 35 days short of his 76th year. City councilors from the neighboring municipalities and colonies bore the body in stages all the way from Nola to Beauvais, but at night, owing to the hot weather, laying it during the day in the town hall or principal temple of every halting place. From Beauvais, a party of Roman equites carried it to the vestibule of his house at Rome. In Augustus's will, he left a bequest of 40 million sesterces to the Roman people, 3.5 million to the tribes, 1,000 to every Praetorian guard, 500 to every member of the urban cohorts, 300 to every legionary soldier. These legacies were to be paid at once, because he had always kept enough cash for this purpose. There were other minor bequests, some as large as 2 million sesterces, which were not to be settled until a year after his death, because, quote, "My estate is not large. Indeed, my heirs will not receive more than 150 million sesterces. For, although my friends have bequeathed me some 1.4 billion in the last 20 years, nearly the whole of this sum, besides what came to me from my father, from my adopted father, and from others, has been used in the public interest."